This was a story I grew up hearing my mom telling me. I was really young when it happened, and I know for a fact it was before I was 5. I only have some foggy memory of the event, especially because my mom at the time didn't want to freak me out. Some context. First, we have family all over the country. I remember spending so much of my childhood just on road trips from state to state to visit family. So we know our ins and outs on traveling. 2. When I was a child, I would randomly hug strangers and tell them that I loved them. I was so filled with joy and love that it just spilled over onto other people. There was basically only one stranger I never immediately latched onto the second I saw them. And this is that story. So my mom was taking me to visit some relatives while my dad was staying at home with my brothers. She had to go house sit and, in general, is a better caretaker of me than my father. So it made sense that I went with her. We were driving for hours until we finally hit a rest stop and got out to use the restroom. Now, there was already this guy in the parking lot, and according to my mom, it looked like he was watching everyone who was entering and leaving the rest stop. The second we got out of the car, he did too. My mom held my hand as we went into the restroom, but immediately picked up on the fact I let go of her hand to hold her other hand, the side of her away from the man. Now looking back, she told me that it was clear somewhere in my tiny child brain that I picked up some sign of danger because I avoided the man as much as I could, and I would quicken my pace to the restroom and car. I never did that with another stranger ever again. I had never blatantly avoided another adult like that. Anyways, we do our business and head back to the car, and the man had gone back to his car and watched us leave, only to then follow us in his own car. My mom immediately realized what was going on and tried to shake him off on the highway. He wouldn't budge and tried to get as close as he could. Apparently while doing this, a semi-truck driver noticed how frantic and how off she was driving and could see her looking back at his car. He realized what was going on and drove up to her side and kind of made eye contact with her, and they were on the same page from then on out. Turns out the driver called up on his radio to other truckers and told them what was going on, and a bunch of drivers from different routes nearby came onto the same highway we were traveling on. A few minutes later, they began blocking out the guy's car and essentially trapping him away from my mother and I as she turned onto an exit to get off the highway to another rest stop. He got out and talked to my mom and told her he picked up what was happening, asked us if we were okay, and drove us to a Burger King and got us something to eat. We talked, and he followed us back onto the road until eventually we went our separate routes. So to the guy who probably was going to try to kidnap my mom and me, let's not meet. And to the truck driver who probably saved our lives, thank you. I recently ran into an old coworker at the sandwich shop in the truck stop. We chatted for a while before he had to leave, but I started thinking about my stint at that place. Specifically, the creepy sandwich guy. In college, I worked some overnights at the truck stop. It was a pretty safe place in a smaller town. And there had only been 3 incidents in the 4 years the place had been open before I got hired in. 1 trucker got robbed, 1 group of ladies arrested for servicing the truckers, and 1 OD. I was never really worried, even though my coworkers seemed a little concerned that I was a young girl working overnights at a truck stop when there was only 1 other employee in the whole place. Usually it was really slow. Most of the time I'd get 3 or 4 truckers coming in within the first hour. A couple people came in with the munchies and ordered 3 dozen cookies one time, but usually it was maybe 1 or 2 people an hour, if that, so I'd spend about 3 hours cleaning ovens, finishing dishes, deep cleaning the lobby, that kind of thing. And then I'd get to spend whatever time between customers doing homework. A few weeks before I inevitably left this place, a guy came in about 20 minutes before my shift was over, so it's about 5 a.m. by this point. My coworker had arrived early so he could fill out some paperwork he had to get done, so he was sitting in the back office already. I started making this customer sandwich, making chit-chat like usual. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He told me he was driving from New York to Wisconsin and asked me a little bit about how my night had been. I wrapped up his sub, rang it up, and threw in a small discount for him since he seemed nice. And I was just happy I was getting ready to go home for a few hours of sleep before I headed to campus. When I went to take his change, things went wrong. He dropped the coins in my hand, but suddenly he had his grip tight around my wrist. The next thing I knew, I'm on the other side of the counter on the floor. He had yanked me across the counter and still had a tight grip on my wrist. Thankfully, my coworker was there. The manager on the other side had slipped into the bathroom, so to this guy's knowledge, I was the only one there at the moment. But my coworker, while filling out his papers, was looking at the cameras and had seen everything. He was out of the back just seconds after I hit the ground, and before I really knew what was going on, he had chased the guy outside. He didn't pursue him far, afraid that someone else was nearby who would come after me, so he ran back inside, locked the door to our side of the store, and shouted for the manager to call the police. The cops came, and they searched the area and watched the security videos, but nothing ever came from it. The guy disappeared, and I never heard anything about him. I put in my 2 weeks notice the following day after my nerves calmed down. I was switched around, so I worked during the day, around my classes for the last few days, and they made it a policy that 2 people were to be working both sides of the truck stop on overnights from that point on. I still live about a half an hour from there, and honestly, I haven't went back since my last day just because that memory is still in my mind, almost 8 years later. Being a young woman in a nearly exclusively male-dominant industry, I have plenty of stories about creepers I've encountered over the years. This particular story about this one creep is likely the worst yet. At the time, I was working for a steel pipe processing plant as a receiver. Trucks with 40-foot long pipes would come in, and it was my job to offload them with a giant forklift. First, though, I had to collect the BOL from the driver. BOL stands for Bill of Lading. It's a shipping document that has information about what's on the load, where it's going, where it's from, etc. So I would retrieve the BOL from the trucker and I would compare the sheet to the cargo and sign off on it, if everything checks out. I would see a lot of the same drivers on a regular basis. I often got a lot of joking comments about how I looked too young to be driving a machine that size. A few of them asked me out, but I'm married and most of the guys respected that. So when I encountered a new driver from one of the trucking companies, it really didn't surprise me when one of the very first, if not the first thing he said to me was, "How old are you?" 23, I replied with a half-hearted chuckle. "Are you married?" "I'm engaged, so pretty much," I replied, starting to get reasonably uneasy about this guy, not wanting to make small talk or answer any more increasingly personal questions from this guy I just met. I asked him for the BOL. "Anything for you, sexy girl," he said. Excuse me? What did you just call me?" "It's really sexy to see a girl like you driving a big truck," he said. Now, I'm a bit of a hothead, and I need to stand up for myself in situations like this, or else I risk becoming a welcome mat for this kind of attention. He hands me the paperwork with the trademark creepy grin, like he was getting off on the fact that I was within grabbing distance from him. "Listen, old man," as I snatched the paperwork out of his hand. "I do not come to work to be spoken to like that. I'm here for a paycheck, not a date." "What? It was just a compliment." "Don't be like that, sexy girl. Don't call me or say anything to me that you wouldn't say to any of my male coworkers. I have a name, and it's not smart to talk to anyone like that before you know what it is." "I bet it's bitch," he said. I signed off on his shit, dropped his copy in the mud, and went over to the other driver waiting in line, took his paperwork, and made the creeper wait about 30 minutes, offloading 2 other trucks before I got to his. We have a safety rule that the driver must be inside the truck while it's being offloaded, so I took this opportunity to be a bigger bitch, laid on the horn of my truck and angrily yelled at him, saying, "Get in your fucking truck." After I offloaded him, I went to my supervisor and told him what happened. Not a formal complaint, but to make him aware of everything that transpired and to let him know that the driver might end up complaining to his superiors about how long it took me to see him. My supervisor sided with me. He knows that if I lost my shit on someone, they probably deserved it. He knew about a few other incidents prior, so he was supportive. He told me to report anything else the guy does that's fucked up, and said he'd be willing to send someone else over to deal with that particular driver, if and when he brought another load. Later on that day, he made a funny comment about how sexy I looked in my uniform. Oversized overalls, grease-stained hoodie, boots and hard hat. I didn't wear makeup or perfume to work. I looked like and was mistaken for one of the guys on a few other occasions, so the creep must have been thinking, "Oh my god, a girl. I must say some nasty shit." Anyway, I thought I made things pretty clear to the creeper and that he wasn't going to bother me anymore. Nevertheless, I wasn't keen on the idea of having to walk up to his cab to get paperwork from him again. The next day, guess who shows up with a new load? I call over the radio. "My favorite driver is here. Can someone grab his paperwork?" A couple minutes go by and one of the coworkers I get along with well drives up in his smaller tow motor to approach the driver for his BOL. I wait off to the side and take the opportunity to have a smoke next to my machine, while I wait for my coworker to come back with the paperwork. He comes back and of course wants to scoop on everything that happened the day before. I guess the driver asked why I wasn't there to collect the BOL. My coworker told me I was busy. Meanwhile, I was having a smoke and clear view. In no hurry to offload the asshole, I told the coworker what transpired when suddenly my coworker interrupted me. Don't look, but I think he's taking pictures of you. Of course, my head whipped around, and sure enough, this guy was holding up his phone, pointing it at me, taking pictures, I assume. I scurried up into my machine and got on the radio for my supervisor and said, "My favorite driver is taking pictures of me now. 10-4, I'll call security, do not offload him. Given the nature of what we do and why we do it, there are strict security guidelines at this place. Once a month, we had bomb sniffer dogs inspect the property, so it was that big of a deal. So even if he wasn't taking pictures of me, he had no business taking pictures on the property. Security shows up, and I watch as the driver hands him his phone. My coworker was there with him, and later told me that the guy said he was just trying out his new phone. Bullshit, but whatever. They didn't find photos of me or the property on his phone, but he had a few minutes to delete them. Either way, he was banned from the property, and my supervisor reported him, and what had happened the day before to the driver's employer. I never saw him again, but the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, another driver from the same company, a nice guy that I had good rapport with, filled me in on my favorite driver. "Your buddy got canned, huh? Oh, that's too bad. I'm gonna miss him. Yeah, he was on thin ice because the girls in the office were getting weird vibes from him. Always hanging around the office way more than necessary. Nothing to fire him over, though. But his police check came in. Turns out he has prior sexual assaults on his record. Oh, that's lovely." I'm a long-haul trucker. I've seen deal with a lot of weird and scary stuff. I was traveling up US 93 in Nevada, heading to Portland, Oregon for a delivery. It was around 1:30 in the morning and I needed to stop and log my half-hour break. I found a wide spot and pulled off, did my log-ups, and made myself a sandwich. While I was eating said sandwich, I noticed a vehicle pulling behind me. I didn't get too concerned about it, but kept one eye on it while I ate. Then it got strange. I noticed a figure in the headlight of the vehicle approach the back, driver's side of my trailer, stop, and looked like he or she was rubbing the backside of my trailer with his or her hand. Suspicious, I got the pistol out of my lockbox back in my sleeper, cocked it and locked it, slid it behind my waistband, and proceeded to climb out of my rig. I walked about 10 feet back, kept my hand on the butt of my pistol, and flicked my flashlight on and aimed it at the person. It was a man. Weird-looking fellow in a dirty whitish trench coat, long straggly hair and bald on top. He was rubbing something on the side of my trailer. I hollered at him to stop what he was doing. He looked up at me, smirked, and, without turning his gaze off of me, starts walking towards me. I backed my way to my door, keeping my hand on my pistol but not pulling it out. I didn't feel like my life was in danger at the time. Opened my door, climbed into my rig, shut the door, and locked it. The dude walks up by my door, looks up at me, still smirking. I'm thinking, what the fuck? This dude is off of his rockers. I'm thinking my half-hour break is over and it's time to go. However, while I'm looking down at him and getting ready to turn the key, I feel my truck rock. I jump and look at my driver's side mirror. Nothing. I look over to check my passenger side mirror, and there on my step, face pressed to my passenger side window, is a freaky perfect replica of an old witch, smiling, rotten teeth, cocking her head left then right, fogging out my window. Needless to say, I about sucked my seat up my ass. But that's not the end of it. The dude then jumps on my driver's side step and then proceeds to start licking my window. Then the witch lady starts smacking my window with the palm of her hands over and over. The dude starts telling me to open up. Hey boy, open up. Come on now, open up. We are friendly. What you got in this trailer of yours? Anything good? Open up, boy. Now I felt threatened. I pulled out my pistol, and the chick immediately disappears off my passenger side step. The dude laughs, jumps up and down on my step, then grins, touches his finger to his nose, then jumps off my step. I fired my truck up and took the hell off. I never did see any headlights following me though.